Part 1. Journey to Athens. Theseus was a young mortal born in southern Greece, in the city of Troezen. When he was 16 years old, his mother, Princess Aethra, told him that it was time he met his father, whose identity she refused to divulge until Theseus completed the challenge set forth by his father. This challenge was to lift a boulder, beneath which his father had buried a pair of shoes and an engraved sword. Theseus's great strength and courage allowed him to fulfill the challenge and retrieve the items, a task thought to be impossible by his father. The princess then informed him that this father was Aegeus, king of Athens. This was quite a revelation, as Theseus had believed his whole life that he was the son of one of the gods. Nevertheless, he set off to Athens, carrying the sword and shoes. Despite his mother's advice to take the sea route, Theseus chose to travel by land and face the dangers awaiting him head on. During his journey, he encountered many murderous scoundrels. The first one was Periphetes, a club-wielding ruffian who smashed people's skulls in with the weapon. Theseus simply snatched the club from him and beat him to death. The club then became his weapon of choice. He continued on, coming upon Sinis, a sinister bandit who tricked passers-by into helping him bend two pine trees together, then tied their wrists to the trees. Eventually the strain would become too much, and the poor people would have to let go, sending their bodies flying and tearing them to bits. Theseus gave Sinis a taste of his own medicine, exacting the same torture on him. Then Theseus was confronted with Sciron. This famous villain lived up on cliffs which are now named after him. He would make each passerby wash his feet in a tub. Then Sciron would grab their feet and flip them off the cliff to be devoured by a vicious man-eating turtle. Continuing the pattern, Theseus tossed Sciron to the turtle. Perhaps Theseus' most interesting and torturous adversary was his final one, Procrustes, he who stretches. Procrustes was cunning. He pretended to be hospitable and invited travelers into his home for a meal and to rest on his special one-size-fits-all bed. What he neglected to mention was that the way the bed worked was that when someone taller than its length lay down, Procrustes cut the person's limbs until they fit. Likewise, when someone was too short, he stretched their body until they fit. Theseus kept up his do unto others attitude and adjusted Procrustes to fit the bed.
Part 2. Killing the Minotaur. Now after his long journey, Theseus finally arrived at Athens. Upon arriving, he was greeted as a hero for defeating the many scoundrels, ruffians, and thugs he'd faced on the highway to Athens. He didn't reveal who he was, though. The king of Athens, his father, Aegeus, hosted a banquet in his honor with his new wife, Medea, as hostess. This Medea also helped Jason retrieve the golden fleece. She was very cautious about Theseus and saw him as a threat against her own son, who was said to be the next heir to Athens after King Aegeus. Medea actually knew who Theseus was after aiding Aegeus to have an heir born to him. Aegeus had either forgotten this or lost hope for the birth of an heir. Medea decided to play off King Aegeus' insecurities and told him to poison Theseus' wine. Before our hero could take a sip of his wine, he used his sword to carve his boar meat. Aegeus, recognizing the hilt of the sword, threw the cup down to the ground, while at the same time Medea escaped on a chariot pulled by a dragon. Theseus was now seen as the heir to Athens. Now in Athens, the king of Crete, Minos, collected a periodic tribute of young men and women to be sacrificed to the Minotaur. He did this because his son died while in Athens. Minos used the power of the Cretan navy to exact this revenge of his. The Minotaur was a half-man, half-bull monster that lived in the center of the labyrinth, a complex and challenging maze. Minos' wife, Pasiphae, bore the Minotaur as a punishment from the gods. Minos had been challenged to see whether or not he was of divine parentage. Calling upon Poseidon, the sea god sent him a beautiful white bull from the sea. Admiring it so much, Minos did not sacrifice it like he should have. Poseidon then punished the king's wife, making her fall in love with said bull. Daedalus, the master craftsman, built Pasiphae a hollow cow to approach the bull. Thus the Minotaur was created. It is said to have a bull's head and a man's body. Theseus soon became a part of the 14 to be sacrificed to the Minotaur. As they approached Crete, King Minos started flirting with one of the Athenian maids. Defending her, Theseus claimed it was his duties as a son of Poseidon. Minos, deciding to test the hero, threw his signet ring overboard and told Theseus to fetch it for him. Diving down, Theseus, being abated by the deities of the sea, he retrieved the ring as well as a jeweled crown from a Nereid. Arriving in Crete, Theseus meets Princess Ariadne, daughter of King Minos. Falling in love with him on sight, she gave Theseus a clue, or a ball of yarn, given to her by Daedalus. This thread would lead him through the labyrinth and the terrors it held. He promised her that if he made it out of the labyrinth alive, that he would elope with her. Now the maze, constructed by Daedalus, was a vicious trap that when thrown in, the victim could not find the exit. Sooner or later, said victim would have to face the terrifying Minotaur. As there was no way out, the Minotaur was not only its monster, but also its prisoner, seeing as it could not escape. Entering the maze, Theseus tied off one of the ends of the clue and advanced deeper into the labyrinth. Theseus soon came in contact with the sleeping Minotaur, catching it off guard. Being the hero he was, Theseus beat it to death with his bare fists, then followed his yarn back to the entrance, successful and beloved.
After his success at the labyrinth, Theseus kept his promise with Ariadne and eloped with her. Though, on their journey back to Athens, Theseus abandoned Ariadne on the island of Naxos. Before Theseus had gone to Crete to kill the Minotaur, Theseus had made an agreement with his father, Aegeus. This agreement was that when he sailed back home from the labyrinth alive, Theseus would change his black sail to a white sail. If Theseus returned dead, then the sail would stay black. As Theseus traveled back to Athens, he forgot to change his sail from black to white. When Aegeus saw Theseus' ship in the distance with a black sail, he became very depressed. King Aegeus eventually jumped off a cliff, committing suicide. Because of this action, Theseus became the new king of Athens. Soon after Theseus was declared king, he decided to resign from his position. The reason for Theseus' resignation was that he favored a people's government. Though he was no longer royalty, Theseus had many adventures during his lifetime. These adventures included the Great Caledonian Hunt, the Great War of the Seven against Thebes, and sailing on Argo to find the Golden Fleece. Theseus traveled to many places, such as the Amazons, where he brought back one warrior woman named Antiope, also known as Hippolyta. They later had a son named Hippolytus. The people from Antiope's home country later rescued her and invaded Attica, the city around Athens, but they soon got kicked out by Theseus. In addition, Theseus and his friend Perseus made a plan to marry the daughters of Zeus. These daughters were Helen of Troy and Persephone. Theseus, being the great abductor of women, kidnapped Helen and decided to keep her until she was old enough to marry. Theseus eventually left Helen with his mother and traveled to the underworld with Perseus to retrieve Persephone. When they arrived in the underworld, Theseus and Perseus got tricked into sitting on the chair of forgetfulness. Neither of them could get up from this chair. Theseus was later saved by Hercules, who returned them back into the world. In the later years, Theseus married Ariadne's sister, Phaedra. When Phaedra, Theseus, and Hippolytus met all together for the first time since Theseus had sent his son to southern Greece to be raised, Hippolytus and Theseus shared a strong affection for each other. But he didn't notice Phaedra, since Hippolytus is known for not noticing women. Besides this fact, Phaedra still chose to fall in love with him. Hippolytus loved her when he found out about the secret love. Since Hippolytus didn't feel the same way about Phaedra as she did for him, she resolved to die. Theseus later found a letter written by his wife before she committed suicide. This letter talked about her secret love affair with Hippolytus. Theseus was appalled and banished Hippolytus from the land. After this big decision of Theseus's, Artemis decided to talk to him about the real truth between Phaedra and his son. Theseus was heartbroken when he found out his son had nothing to do with Phaedra's desires. Theseus was also devastated when he found out that Hippolytus had been killed because of Theseus's wish of wanting his son dead. Hippolytus had been in a chariot accident. His horses dragged him to death when they got scared by a sea monster that had jumped out from the sea water. Later, Theseus was banished from Athens and retired to the court of Lycomedes. He was later killed by his friend, King Lycomedes, for an unknown reason.